Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy spoke at the UN General Assembly today, trying to rally Western allies in support of his country's efforts to defeat Russia after its unprovoked and illegal invasion. Speaking in English, Zelenskyy warned about the threat of Putin's war and that it poses to the world, including the heightened risk of a nuclear disaster and the possibility that Russia expands its land grab beyond Ukraine.
If, God forbid, Russia causes a nuclear disaster at one of our nuclear power plants, radiation will not respect state borders. And unfortunately, various nations could feel the devastating effects. And now every neighbor of Russia in Europe and Central Asia feels that the war could come to them as well. And just think what kind of losses that would mean for the world.
Now, Zelenskyy also rejected China and Brazil's peace proposal and reiterated the need for a just peace for the Ukrainian people. Joining me now is Bill Taylor, former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine and vice president for Russia and Europe at the U.S. Institute of Peace. Ambassador Taylor, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Kristen.
So we heard this impassioned speech from President Zelenskyy. We know he is going to be meeting with President Biden, with Vice President Kamala Harris. What do you anticipate he's looking for in terms of deliverables from those meetings in order for his visit to be a success?
Kristen, he has what he calls a victory plan. And part of that plan is military. Part of that plan is economic. Part of the plan is diplomatic. On the military side, he does have a specific request, and that is to be able to use U.S., NATO, his own weapons. He can use any case, but he needs the permission, the authority from the United States to use our weapons deep into Russia. The Russians are attacking Ukraine from deep in Russia, from air bases and missile launch sites. And President Zelenskyy is going to be asking President Biden, respectfully, he appreciates all the support, but he really wants the ability to defend himself against these deep strikes.
What do you anticipate the response will be? And it comes against the backdrop. The criticism of the U.S. strategy toward Ukraine is that the Biden administration is giving Ukraine just enough ammunition, munitions, aid to stay in the war, but not necessarily enough to win.
So, Kristen, I think you're right. That had been the charge.
Yeah.
But in the last about 3 or 4 weeks, the message coming from the administration has been different. It used to be, you were exactly right, it used to be, we're with them as long as it takes. But now it's changed. Now it's, we're with them until they prevail, until Ukrainians prevail. That means to me, win. And then your question is a good one. Will they get the authority? Will President Biden and the administration give Zelenskyy the ability to shoot deep? There's been a debate within the administration, very intense debate. I bet that they will get the authority to do that, but we will see over the next 2 days.
We certainly will continue to track that. I want to ask you about some exclusive reporting by NBC News that senior Pentagon officials have recommended that the U.S. provide Ukraine with white phosphorus munitions for use on the battlefield. The White House so far rejecting that idea several times. We should note that it's not illegal to use white phosphorus shells, but there are humanitarian concerns. How do you see this playing out, and what are the implications?
This is a difficult one. I remember back, I was in Vietnam, and we used white phosphorus not to shoot at the enemy, but to illuminate the night, is to get light, so be able to see at night. Using white phosphorus has the potential to cause damage and injury to civilians. This is a hard decision. I would imagine this will take some time before that is approved.
Let me ask you about another development. It was anticipated that President Zelenskyy would meet with former President Trump, the Republican nominee. That meeting has now been canceled, according to one official. Part of the reason was because of Zelensky's criticisms when he called J.D. Vance's positions on the war, quote, too radical. Is this a blow to Zelenskyy? How do you see the fact that they're no longer meeting?
President Zelenskyy wanted to brief first President Biden on his victory plan, but then the two candidates, he wanted to brief both sides, both Vice President Harris as well as Donald Trump, and he put in that request. He responded to statements by the vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance, who has said in the past that he doesn't much care what happens in Ukraine. So that was something that undoubtedly bothered President Zelenskyy when he hears that. But he does want to make the case to former President Trump that this is an important piece. They've been fighting for 944 days against the Russians. And President Zelenskyy wants to make that case to President Biden, Vice President Harris, and Donald Trump.
He's also getting some criticism for visiting Pennsylvania, Republicans accusing him basically of going to a battleground, putting his thumb on the scale. Are you surprised that he decided to go to Pennsylvania, or do you see this as a part of his tactical trip to make the case for why the United States needs to be on board and stay on board with supporting Ukraine?
He undoubtedly wants to make that case, so to keep the United States on board. And the place he went was where they're manufacturing artillery shells. Yeah. And he's very short on artillery shells, and he wants to really thank those workers in Pennsylvania for making those shells, sending to Ukraine for their use. So that's the main thing, is a message to the U.S. people and U.S. workers that you're supporting Ukraine and you're defending yourself.
Okay, well, a very significant trip, significant speech that President Zelenskyy delivered today. Ambassador Bill Taylor, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Crystal.
We really appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.